Just around the corner from the Copenhagen City Hall, we find the Copenhagen City Museum, and that's what we're going to explore today. And I'll head in there to see if you should come and explore this museum when you're in Copenhagen. So give me a moment to find out. When you enter the Copenhagen City Museum, you enter into a great hall, but let's just see what was this building used for before it was a museum, because it has been used for other things, and you can clearly see it by the way it's built. It is built as a big governmental building because it is. It was the public trustees' office, those who guarded over those who could not take care of themselves, such as people with brain disabilities, that they were considered stupid at the time. Today we have many other words for them, but basically it is that you don't have the mental ability to take care of yourself, and then the government goes in and say, we help you to take care of you. It was kids who should take care of the kids. They helped parents get along, and usually back in the day when this was active, no matter what, the mother got the parental rights, and the father, well, he had no rights in that regard, but he had the money to take care of. It was another time, let's just say it like that. And then this was changed. Back in the 30s, this building, it became something else. It became, well, the Child Welfare Service building. It is not that they say, oh, you can take care of the child. No, the Child Welfare goes out and say, all right, you cannot take care of your child, or we think you cannot take care of the child. We take it to court and says who can take care and all these kind of things. And there has even been the Child Healthcare Service had offices there, so this has been a building to help those who needed it. And that really, well, conforms to why this building is as it is. As we go around in this museum, we don't notice it, but what do it has as exhibits? Because that is quite interesting about this museum. Because if we start from the bottom of the museum, there is the shop in one side, big hall, a big room, and there you have to purchase the tickets, and I'll return to ticket prices, so stay tuned for ticket prices, and you might be surprised about the ticket price. In the other side, there is a special exhibit, and that is where they always had the special exhibit, and this time the special exhibit was how Copenhagen become wonderful, and we have an old song I cannot play to you due to copyright, but it is Wonderful, Wonderful Copenhagen. And this is a song most Danes have heard growing up. That is also part of the Wonderful Copenhagen, because the Wonderful Copenhagen is also a brand about Copenhagen, and this is how this developed. So this was quite an interesting exhibit. I don't know how long it will be there, but I do recommend that you visit the special exhibits if you are ever in the Copenhagen City Museum. But moving up to the first floor, it is here we start to dive down into Copenhagen history. It starts back when Copenhagen was a bunch of settlements throughout the land, and there were no real cohesion. It was not a town. And this museum takes us through that. It shows us the old remains that they have found. Maybe morbid for some, but I actually think they have done it in a splendid way, because they have really put it into context. For example, we have a skeleton here, and we have a lot of text about why is this, where have we dug it up, and what does it tell us, this skeletal. And they have some old remains and some old stones. And what do these things tell us? They have an old boat. What does this tell us? And then we start to move into when Copenhagen became the king's city. Because at some point the Copenhagen became the king's city. It did that, not becoming the real capital, but the king's city, forth and back, and I don't think I understand it correctly, but it was as far as I understood it, because it was forth and back, and some things have been lost in fires, which are also well documented in this museum. So, well, go in there and see how you get a grip of it, and then write it down in the comment, because I'd like to hear how you understand all the text that is in there. There are great explanations about how people were living, how it develops into a harbor city, then into a king's city, and becoming the capital of Denmark, and becoming this big powerhouse in Scandinavia, because Copenhagen has been a big powerhouse in Scandinavia for many years. And as we move up through time. And here we see how great a museum it actually is, because it really shows us that Copenhagen develops from, well, a small little settlement or a bunch of small little settlements all the way up to a big city that it is today, the big city you are walking around in, giving you a great understanding of the city you are visiting. So if you are visiting Copenhagen, should you visit this museum? How many stars will I give it? Stay tuned to find out. Before we get to how many points this should get and my recommendation, I will just point out that in the top floor there's a big model of Copenhagen. There you can push some buttons and it will light up different areas, explaining what they are. And in the same room there's this big numbers wall, this big digital wall telling you different facts about Copenhagen, how many homeless there are, how much garbage it produces, how many houses there are. And these facts keep accumulating on the screen. I could stand there for hours without seeing the same fact twice. So you get a lot of facts from this about Copenhagen. So I do recommend that you at least stand a little bit of time there and look at it and see what does this have to offer and what does it tell me. Because it also tells you something about tourism, it also tells you something about the inhabitants, it also tells you something about the social problems, as well as the good things. So it's not just bad. And I like this mixing of things. But let's get into how many stars, my recommendations, what should you think? Because when we get into that, I have to give this museum 9 stars, or 9 out of 10 points. Because this museum is great for really exploring Copenhagen and exploring the origin of Copenhagen. It tells it in a good way if you have the time. It is not the most kid-friendly museum I have seen, so bigger kids, yes. If you have teenagers along, they will probably be bored, but it's okay. If you have small kids along, it is not a museum for you, in my opinion. I saw a lot of kids in there, and there was a little play area, but the exhibits are not really kid-friendly. But if you have a kid that is great at going to museums, I had such a one when he was 8 to around 10, 11. He loved going to museums, just looking at things. And if your kid's like that, great museum. If your kid is touch everything, not a great museum. So I will have to stay on the 9 out of 10. Moving on. How many steps did I get in there? Well, I actually got 11,000 steps in this museum, so, well, it's great for your step count. And that is, of course, great for your health to raise your step count. But moving on, the ticket price. The ticket price is 95 Danish crowns. For that price, you get access to the Copenhagen Museum. But stay tuned, I have something more to tell you about the ticket price. Furthermore, you get access to the Powerhouse Museum, something I will also be covering in another episode, and you get access to Nikolai Art Hall, something I would not pay for, but if it's part of the ticket, I go in there. And you can actually get in at 0 crowns. How can you do that? Where about this 0 crowns are you saying? Well, if you get there on a Wednesday, the admission fee is 0 Danish crowns. It's free Wednesdays. Alright, I have just been into that museum, and in conclusion for all that I have just said, well, you should come here and visit it. You should come here and explore the Copenhagen City Museum, and you should come here to, well, see what town it is that or city it is that you are going out and exploring, because there are so much history hidden here, and you will only find it by heading into this museum. And if you want another museum you want to visit, then check out this video right here.